Hey there, word wizards! Welcome back to another episode of Am I Right? And I am so stoked to bring you a well-weathered, well-worn. He's got it all in one bag. He's all that in a bag of chips. Robert Masello. He's an author and a writer in many different genres and categories, and I think that he has a lot of gems to bring us, especially those of us still aspiring to be a writer. He's learned a lot about the publishing process. He's learned a lot about agenting. So we're just gonna kick it right off. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be
John.
here.
I'm gonna read his bio here and let you sit there slightly awkwardly while I read your credentials because I think that they do need to know. I think it's really impressive. He's been a writer his entire life. Robert has. He's a journalist in New York for many of the major magazines and newspapers, and an author of over 20 books, both novels and nonfiction, several of which have appeared on national bestseller lists. He's also written various television shows on all the major networks, and he's a member of the Writers Guild of America and lives in Santa Monica, California. So, um, is there anything you'd like to add to your credentials here? Anything you want to mention?
Lion of Cafe Society. I don't know. I mean, no, that covers most of the
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean it's an impressive that is an impressive portfolio in one paragraph. So we're really happy to have you on here. One of the questions that we like to ask every time is that it seems that there is a debate going that there's some kind of secret sauce for a successful published author versus a non-successful one that continues to query and kind of struggle through the trenches. And so we like to ask, in your experience, both as a writer and seeing other writers and authors, is there any kind of trait, distinguishing trait, or tendency that they have that makes a writer successful? And you can go any direction with this.
Well, I mean, the simplest, and you probably heard this before, that is perseverance. You're gonna get knocked down a million times, and you're gonna go to agents who aren't interested in your work. You're gonna reach out to editors who pass. The ones that I know that succeed are the ones that just keep doggedly doing it because they have to do it. They
Mm,
have to do it because there's something in them that makes them really want to do this. Something that you and I had adverted to earlier when we were privately talking is also just this notion that people have sometimes, like they're going to study the marketplace and then they're going to write to the marketplace. Never
mhm,
try to write to the marketplace, because among other things, by the time you're done writing your book that you think is the hot genre, the wave has passed,
mhm,
because publishing is a slow process. Other people write faster than I do, but it takes me about a year to write, most of my novels, sometimes a little longer. And then it's going to take the publishing house another year, sometimes 2 years. I've had that happen, to bring the book out. Whatever you were trying to catch in the way of the zeitgeist or that moment is going to be gone. So write from the heart, write what you want and what you enjoy, most
mhm.
important.
Yeah, and perseverance. I think those are both very important. And I think they come hand in hand. You don't want to write what you're not passionate about anyways. That's not what this career is about. It's not what our industry is for. And so and like you said, I thought it was interesting you mentioned that those who read in a genre can sense an interloper. They can tell if you're not interested in the in what you're writing, and you're gonna get discredited for that. So
You want to
that's a
know, if you want to figure out what you should be writing, this is a simple test.
mm,
Look at your bedside table and see what you're reading. If what you're reading is Regency romances, then you know what? That's fine. Then write one of those, because that's clearly what you enjoy. If it's noir, detective kind of fiction, period pieces, then write that. If it's big historical, sprawling novels, go ahead. Then that's what you like. And it's probably what instinctively and intuitively you already know a lot about, because when you read those books, because you're a fan of that particular genre, you know when it strays, and you know what's interesting, and you know what you're looking for, the landmarks along the way.
mm,
And you just know a lot more about it than you ever think you do.
yeah, right. We read. That's always the top advice. But write what you read. Don't write what you don't read, what you don't know about. I think that's a great thing to bring up, and that definitely brings a lot of insight into success. So thank you. Um, is there? I mean, with publishing, I've heard a lot that it's about who you know. I've heard a lot that it's all just up to the I don't know, the stars and the forces. And I know there can be different opinions here, but from your experience, um, how much of it is connection? How much of it is luck? And how much of it is hard work? Like, is there one that kind of precedes the other? Is it what you just said, just continual endurance, and persistence?
Well, yeah, hard work is the thing you mentioned. That is the most important. Unfortunately, I hate that part of it. Um, and connections don't hurt. But when I was starting my career, 3 centuries ago, the publishing business really was centered in New York City, and it really did help to have connections. I mean, you really did meet the editors at the publishing house, and you bumped into them at restaurants and parties. And that did allow you a certain amount of access. I felt like a writer in Baton Rouge or Kansas City is not going to have that same advantage that those of us who are also kind of like, I don't know, absorbing what's happening in the publishing world and the industry because you were there. You just heard things and you knew things that you might not know if you were a little bit off the beaten path. That said, that's all changed a lot now because of the internet and because of the world we live in. So if you write and you write from the heart and you write well, whatever it is you're writing, you can get it out there. And there was a time when if you self-published, for instance, your book, it was the kiss of death in terms of the publishing industry. It's like, oh, you already brought your book out yourself. Random House, Simon and Schuster, Harper's, forget it. We're not interested.
Right.
That's changed. And that
Mm-hmm.
changed over the years with a number of books that people self-published, including 50 Shades of Grey, which was self-published initially. These
Mm-hmm.
books went on to like huge numbers and huge success because the publishers learned that, like, hey, if it's finding an audience on the web on its own without the backing of a major publishing house, there's something there. And then they take it on and they put some muscle behind it. And the rest is history. Then it can go on to greatness. So the lesson that I think I learned very early on and that I would impart now, and this is generally true, whenever you write, try to get it out there. I don't care if it's in a local, if it's the local free newspaper or whatever. Too many writers I know say, no, I'm holding my work because I want it to get out in perfect shape in the right venue. And I'm thinking, and that's an excuse for keeping things in a drawer. Don't keep things in a drawer. Get them out there because you never, ever know who's going to read it where, how it's going to find its way someplace and lead to bigger and better things.
Yeah, and I think part of that motivation to keep it, close to your chest, besides just the time that it takes to get published, is worrying what's going to be brought out when it is in the light, and what needs, to be repaired, what's lacking in your own writing skills, and I think that's something that you have to be thick-skinned for in this industry, but also that you need to remove yourself from that criticism to know that it's helpful criticism. And I want to know from you, I think I mean, every author has struggled at times, to believe that what they're writing is good enough or will fit the bar, in their industry. And I just wonder, what do you do? Is there any methods that you've used, any thought processes that you've used to remind yourself why you're writing, what your worth is, and motivates you to keep going?
Well, sometimes I look at the bookshelf. I mean, I've written around 25 books. So, I'll look there and I'll go, okay, I've done this 10 times. I've done this 20 times before. Clearly, even in those dark nights of the soul, when you think this is not working, you go, I've had this feeling before and I will power through. Because there is, the old line about a beginning, a muddle, and an end, to especially longer works, a novel, for instance. And there are those points at which I really do, the thing is, I've done this a million times and I'm still lying in bed staring at the ceiling many a night going, where do I go? Is this thing making any sense to anybody? I'm not sure it makes sense to me
Mm-hmm.
because I don't. And here's, I don't know. There's two schools of thought about most of these things. When you're writing an extended work, whether it's a screenplay or a novel,
Mm-hmm.
there are those, and my friend George, for instance, is in the first camp. Man, he outlines every beat, every moment of it. He will write an 80-page document before he writes his novel. in which
Wow.
every character's arc is expressed and their background and I I wish I could do that. I just can't. I get so bored.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having to outline stuff when I was in 7th and 8th grade, and Mrs. Hughes made us outline everything. And for
Mm-hmm.
every one, you had to have an A, and for every A, you had to have a B. And I thought, oh, we murder to dissect, as Wordsworth said. And
Absolutely.
I can't do it. And when I do an outline, I depart from it in no time anyway, because a
Um,
character will walk in or something will happen, and I think, oh, that's kind of cool. That seems to work. And I wrote a novel once in which the mother, if I'd outlined it, was a tertiary character at best. And when the novel was finally done, she was central to the action.
mm,
And I don't know how I could have written that book without her, but I didn't see that when I first came up with the idea. And lo and behold, that's what that book became. So
mm.
I think that there's those who outline, and then there's those like me you'll have those really scary times when you think, I don't know what happens next. And you just kind of have to lean into that and go, well, maybe the reader will be enjoying that too, wondering what happens next. Though,
That's a good point.
yeah, though he or she is in the lucky position of having me have to make that decision and do something about it.
Well, that is part of what makes it exciting, though, too, is having those options, saying, "Well, I don't really know what's happening next," which means I can try a bunch of different things. And if I mess up in this area and this part of the plot just really isn't supporting the rest of it, back it up and try a different road. See what goes
Yeah,
there.
I remember
Yeah.
learning that lesson from a friend of mine, Linda. She was a little bit older than I was in New York, and she was a really successful professional writer,
Mm.
and really smart. And she lived 2 blocks from me in New York. And I remember she was having trouble with a novel, and she'd written a bunch of books. And she said, "Would you mind reading this?" And I'm just stuck. And I went to her place. She had a green velvet armchair, and I sat there for a couple of hours and I read, and I could see exactly where the book went wrong, and I knew why she was stuck. I can't do that with my own stuff often, but with hers I could. I thought, when the character went to Switzerland, it was a mistake. The book went off in the wrong direction. And then she came back in the room with a cup of coffee and said, "Have you done reading?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "What's the problem? What is going on?" And I said, "You know what, like page 125, when the guy goes to Switzerland?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "It just went off the rails for me there until it got back to America." And she said, "Yeah, I sort of thought that might be it."
Mm.
And what she did was she took the manuscript, she took page 126 to like page 180, which was the Switzerland section. She opened a sea chest that she used as a coffee table, and she tossed those pages in there. And I thought, no, that's like months worth of work, and you're just guarding it. She goes, "Well, I'm not throwing it out. I mean, I have it to go back to if I need to." But
Mm.
she was an absolute professional about it. She didn't cry as I would have done. She didn't lie on the floor and whimper and roll around going, "But I worked so hard on the Switzerland section. I did research." She approached it the way a carpenter would who was making a table and one leg was too short. He would knock that leg off and make a new leg for the table. And I thought,
And it is a craft. It's a
yeah,
craft, right?
that's how
Absolutely.
she dealt with it. And I thought, oh my gosh, if you're a writer, everything has to be inspired. You write it and it comes out perfectly the first time. Well, it doesn't. She taught me
If that was the case, I'd have to get a new career really fast.
that. Me too.
That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of inspiration that we need. It's okay if you don't get it right on the first draft. You probably heard it before, but that doesn't mean that it isn't true. And I think
Yeah.
we need to continuously revisit that and remember it. Um, so, for those who are aspiring or continuing to work on their manuscripts, maybe they're not even ready quite yet for the query process, but would you give them any advice for comparing themselves to other books, other authors that they're seeing finished? I've heard a lot of things, especially recently, with
Yeah.
others saying, "Oh, I just read this book; it's so amazing, and incredible, and I know that it's a finished draft, and mine isn't, but it feels like I'm never going to get there." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, when you read, when you read, the finished books of, whoever it is that's, that you're emulating.
Mm,
For me, it was E.L. Doctorow for a period of years there, and I would read his prose, which was just pellucid and on point all the time. And I thought, and original in terms of the conceits and the concepts. And I thought,
mm,
boy, I can't be E.L. Doctorow. Well, again, E.L. Doctorow was being E.L. Doctorow. And there were times even when I used to try to think this through. There were two ways. You'd walk into a Barnes and Noble when there were lots of big Barnes and Nobles everywhere. You'd look at this vast array of shelves and you'd go, how am I going to find a place in here or compete? There are literally 100,000 different titles in this store.
mm,
But then the other part of me would say, well, wait a minute. There's 100,000 titles in here or whatever. That means that there's tens of thousands or more writers represented here.
mm,
And they all got their books out. And, I could be one of them. So you can look at it that way too and go, you know what? There is always room for a new and original voice or a new and original story. And your story is always going to be original. Yes, you and I've talked about there are certain paradigms that we all follow, or that
mm,
most of us follow, whether we like it or not. But at the same time, what you bring to the table, your particular prose rhythms, your particular characters, your particular storyline is always going to be unique. It
mm.
can't not be. It is going to be.
That's our plaque quote for the episode. We always have one quote that I want to put on a plaque for the week, stick it on my wall. That's a perfect quote for us this week.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah, before we wrap it up, I wanted to bring up something that we mentioned off air here, and that if you're writing fiction, you shouldn't be reading fiction.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's more to it than that, obviously. It's about getting out of the head of the other authors that you're reading and just really focusing down on your work. Would you describe that to our audience? I thought that was really significant.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was something, yes, that we discussed off air, but I try not to read too closely to what I am writing.
Mm,
Um, because I can be overwhelmed by another author's voice. If it's really too good, actually, there's two things. If it's bad, it'll destroy your own prose. Your standards will fall if you're going, oh, I can get away with this or that. And if it's very good, it can get depressing. Because you go, well, I'll never write a history book as well as Barbara Tuchman writes a history book. Well, that's the luck of the draw.
mm-hmm,
But I also just think that when I'm writing fiction, and a lot of what I write, we discussed, is historical fiction, I read in that era. I read in that genre. I wrote a book about H.G. Wells not long ago called The Haunting of H.G. Wells. And he had a huge catalog of works. So the time I was working on that book, I read almost exclusively H.G. Wells and Rebecca West. That was his consort at the time, and she became one of the most prominent English journalists of her day also. So I read Rebecca West, who was a character in the book, and I read H.G. Wells, and I read their contemporaries, Bernard Shaw, people like that. It kept me in the voice, and it kept me in the head, and it kept me in their world, which is what I was trying to convey. I mean, I'm trying to live in London in another era or something. In fact, I had a friend who did this for me. I bought maps of Edwardian England from that era, old maps, a huge one that came in like 4 parts.
wow.
It was so detailed, it had every statue that was on every corner in every church, of course, and every school. And I had her put them together and I mounted them on my bedroom wall. And so when I wanted to track where Robert Louis Stevenson might have been going and what route he would take,
Mm,
I could take a magnifying glass from my Oxford English Dictionary boxed set, and I could trace the path, given the bridges and the parks and the hospitals and stuff that he would have passed and used at that era. And it was great to just be in that world completely.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you want to keep up with what's being released in the market, but as Robert has proved here, you can take a minute to focus on your craft and step back and read what's going to be best for what you've got coming. I know for me, if I read a good book and kind of really closely am thinking about it and writing at the same time, I'll sometimes a line will come out, I'll say, "That's such a good line," and then I'll realize that's not my line.
Yeah, I've had that problem
Line! That's
sometimes.
a line from somebody else, yeah, that I have read. And so, um, yeah, I think that's a really interesting approach, one that we haven't heard on the show before, and so I just wanted to bring that up. It has been an absolute delight to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on. And we do have to wrap up here soon, but before we go, would you leave the audience with anything in particular um, about writing, publishing, anything?
Well, again, what we've talked about earlier, which is, write from your heart, write what interests you, because that's what will interest readers. They will know if you're trying to write in a genre that you're not really interested in, or a subject that you're not really attuned to, and keep at it. I mean, if I have a minute, it's I've been in this business a long time, and the last novel I wrote, The Haunting of H.G. Wells, got a bad review in a publishing industry newsletter, and I was devastated. I mean, I'm a grown up. I've done this a million times, and it really dampened my enthusiasm for promoting the book. And I didn't do what I should have done. And weirdly enough, when the book came out, it got rapturous reviews from readers who did like it. And the other industry publications, one of them immediately called it utterly captivating. I thought, great. But if I'd only had that review at the beginning, but there's always going to be somebody out there who doesn't like your work. And because of the internet, they will tell you about it. Ignore them. Nobody is liked by everybody. Tolstoy doesn't get a 5-star rating across the board. It's
Mm-mm.
just going to happen.
Hmm. That's great. Thank you. Perfect. If we, for all of us who are listening, which is probably most of them, and they're interested in being more involved in your community, Robert, what can we do? Where can we go?
You can go to www.robertmasello.com, and you can reach me there. And the two most recent books are The Haunting of H.G. Wells, which is a novel, and then there is Robert's Rules of Writing, 111 Unconventional Lessons That Every Writer Needs to Know. So that's kind of a distillation and an expansion on the stuff we've been talking about this morning.
Hmm.
It's just 111 lessons that I have learned the hard way after doing this for years.
Yeah, and use that resource. It will be in the notes to the audience, but there's a lot in there that you can use. And Robert's willing to share it with you. So, Robert, stick around here for a minute. Thank you for coming on the show, and for the rest of you, right on.